Next up, we have our travel panel who will be speaking about sustainability and innovation in the hotel industry. So for this panel, we have our moderator, Jason Lusk, Impact Acceleration Co-Lead and ADB Ventures, Ian Wilson, Senior Vice President of Non-Gaming Operations, Marina Bay Sands, Jude Kasturi Arachi, Director, Jetwing Hotels Limited, and finally, Jeannie Kwok, Director, Corporate Responsibility, APAC at Hilton. Can we give them a round of applause to invite them up on stage?
Okay. Look forward to a good discussion about innovation and sustainability in the hospitality industry today. Let's get right into it. I think I'd like to start by talking to our host, Ian Wilson from Marina Bay Sands. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure.
So Ian, we're in your facility right now. What are some of the noteworthy or cutting-edge innovations that you've implemented here at Marina Bay Sands?
I guess where to start? We have, since the day we opened, worked really hard on trying to build a culture of continuous improvement as it relates to sustainability. And during that time, we've had some good wins. We've reduced our carbon footprint by 34%. But if I look at some of the notable things that the team has come up with through a lot of trial and error and through working with partners, they invented a system to capture condensate coming out of all the air conditioners in the hotel building, for instance, which captures about 84,000 liters of water a day, which then gets put into landscaping and irrigation and other items. We've done all the easy stuff such as LED lighting and other pieces, sensors in this building to reduce energy when people aren't there. But we've tried to do some other interesting things. So we worked with WWF, for instance, to try and create a sustainable supply chain. There isn't as much of a supply chain as we want. So we actually make donations based on delegates to our green meetings here to help support WWF in coaching fish farms in other parts of Southeast Asia to become ASC or MSC certified. So, our goal is to source 50% of our supply chain or our seafood sustainably by 2020. We're at 48%, I was told today, but that has come through a lot of collaboration and working with others as well. We've done a lot of changing of our infrastructure over time. The technology has come a long way, and a lot of those projects are good ROI, but the low-hanging fruit is continuously disappearing. So we're now doing a lot around big data, machine learning, trying to understand how our building operates, adding more sensors. To have a team be able to improve, they really have to be able to see cause and effect. So we're doing a lot of sub-metering in different areas of the building and a lot more sensors so that you can see what the impact of an initiative was. And then you just try and put in place kind of a try and learn type mentality so that you're continuously trying to get a little bit better and a little bit better at what it is that you're doing each and every day. There's others, but I think that's probably be a good start.
Thanks. That's really interesting. I think this panel, when I first saw it listed on the Summit website, was just innovation in hospitality, and they added the word sustainability later. I think it's really interesting that when I asked you what are some of the cutting-edge innovations that you've implemented at Marina Bay Sands, open question, most of what you pointed to had something to do with sustainability. Jude, you've really done quite a lot with energy and sustainability at Jetwing hotels in Sri Lanka. For example, I know that you're meeting half of your energy requirements through renewable sources. So I guess, first of all, why is that? Why have you placed so much emphasis on sustainability at Jetwing hotels? And what are some of the lessons that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, thank you. I think first and foremost, any industry has an impact in terms of energy consumption. and then our hotel industry, our hospitality industry plays a major role in that compared to the other industries. So we, in our company, realized that, and then if we are to sustain, if the planet is to sustain, then we have to start at our property first, rather than telling somebody else what they should be doing. So we should be conscious and cautious enough to do and realize what we are. So in our company, sustainability strive, there are key, 6 key areas that we focus on. And most of them are on KPIs, and certain these things, certain strategies are not on KPIs. So the 6 strategies are, the first one is energy and carbon, water and waste, biodiversity, because Sri Lanka has a lot of biodiversity, community and culture, responsible sourcing, and family in terms of the employees. Because if you don't look after the employees, they'll make sure that things are not being done. So we realized that, and then we try to align ourselves with the global UN strategic goals, whatever we are doing. And then we wanted to make sure that it is in align or in par with what we are doing, rather than trying to do strange things. So if I am to talk about energy and carbon, as you quite rightly said, we have managed to pull down our carbon footprint by about 70%. And that has been a bit of a strenuous process. It didn't start yesterday. It started about 13 years back. So it has been a journey. And as I always say, sustainability is a journey, and it'll never end up.
So this is kind of an open question to the panel, and this wasn't scripted, but this continues on a discussion that we were having backstage. Do guests care? And is sustainability really a business priority for your hotels?
Sure, I'll take that one. So Hilton has actually done a study around surveying our guests, and we found that guests do care, so there's an increasing trend. And I think what the interesting breakdown is, as one could imagine, a lot of millennials care more. And I think the second factor of what we have also looked at is, are guests willing to pay? So there continues to be a lot of guests who are willing to pay for items that are organic or sustainable. So we do see that as an increasing trend over the years. I think it does differ a little bit by country to country. As a global organization, a lot of our guests are from many markets. So we have a lot of US guests staying at our properties across Asia. So we do see that as a strong emphasis.
I mean, for us, the guests definitely do care. I think people want to be associated with a company that cares, and I think it's also really important for your employee brand or value proposition. Employees really want to be working for a company that wants to make a difference, that wants to show improvement, and they have great pride in that. Increasingly large meetings, it's an extremely important element of where they choose to do business. So in a venue like this, we have a member of our sustainability team who spends a huge amount of time with prospective clients, just walking them through what our sustainability initiatives are, telling them what our certifications and our credentials are, and then helping them plan a meeting so it has a minimal impact. So that is very large in terms of their selection criteria, and it undoubtedly is good business for us because they really do care.
I think earlier I spoke about energy and carbon, but working with the community, responsible sourcing, giving the community a chance to get involved in the supply chain, it makes a huge difference because you get it's not only you, it's other livelihoods you are touching, and biodiversity, and the amount of interest that people have is tremendous. When you start approaching that, and when you see that sort of when things are being destroyed and biodiversity is preserved, actually people go a long way in trying to look into those things. And especially now, I think with regard to plastics, I think it's a tremendous problem. And we have had a very good approach on it. And then we have tried to minimize the usage of plastics. And throughout the company, we have eliminated the PET bottles, and we are having our own bottled water plants in our properties. So that has been a major breakthrough. Like if I am to talk about figures, last month I think production of water bottles was close to 165,000 bottles. So that has been a bit of a great breakthrough. And then we are trying to work on minimizing plastics during operation and zero waste out. So those are things that we have to work on, because we have to exhibit to the guests what we are doing, not as a green wash, as a real initiative, so that they'll buy the story, and if somebody wants to learn from it, they feel free.
So Jeannie, you're from Hilton. Hilton is a global company, obviously, and I think that you're in the best position to comment on what is one of the complexities of the hospitality industry when you talk about implementing any innovation, especially innovations for sustainability, and that is in hospitality. The brand, the operating entity, and the asset owner are not necessarily the same thing. And of course, the best opportunities to integrate new technologies are in new hotel construction. So how does Hilton as the brand and sometimes the operating entity get the asset owner on board with some of the sustainability technologies that you want to bring into your hotels?
I think there are two aspects to that. So one of them is that asset owners generally care about return on investment. So we do look at sustainability elements and try to measure that ROI. For us, we typically look at it from a 3 to 5 year perspective, as do our asset owners. The second area of that is really their own understanding of sustainability and how they can have a huge role to play in it. So one of the things that is maybe a bit different in Asia than the rest of the world is a lot of our asset owners are private wealth individuals or private wealth families. And what we're noticing is that the second and third generations, as they come into those ownership roles, they're the ones who actually do care a lot about environmental sustainability. And so we are trying to influence their decisions as well. I think the first generation might make choices. I had an anecdote the other week with a colleague of mine from China that first generation is more likely to spend money on a marble top because it's guest-facing front of the house versus some capital investment in the back of the house. And so I think that is starting to change, and that's where we have a role to influence as well. The other one is really in architecture and design. So we have shown that there's a lot more interest as well in really creating sustainable designs, things that are both aesthetically pleasing as well as supporting the environment.
But regardless, you need to show where the ROI is.
The ROI.
Yeah. So Ian, you have you're in 3 destinations, correct? Macau, Singapore, and Las Vegas. Have you observed any big differences in the ease of implementing innovative technologies generally and sustainable technologies more specifically in those 3 destinations?
Well, we're very fortunate. We have a strong kind of focus on sustainability from the center of the company and a strong commitment to it. But obviously, every destination is different. So what may be easy in one destination may be challenging in another. So for instance, as it relates to diversion of organic waste, for instance, here in Singapore, there's no composting available. So we do an extensive amount with digesters, but in Las Vegas, they have an awful lot of agricultural farm that they can, or land in proximity that they can then put in a full composting program. So they have a larger diversion rate than we do, and it's more effective and probably less expensive. As it relates to building engineering, we try and share best practices, but once again, your suppliers and providers may be slightly different from destination to destination. And of course, every single building is very unique in terms of how it operates. They were all built at different times, and so there's no one-size-fits-all strategy that can be employed really across the board. So what we do is we have a focus centrally and guidance centrally, but then the individual initiatives are created at each of the properties and implemented at each of the properties, but we have targets that roll up to the entire company to reduce our carbon footprint, our water usage, our waste, et cetera, over time.
So that brings up the question of benchmarking and how you prioritize investments in sustainability and innovative technology. How are you doing that in Sands Group?
Well, we benchmark against each other, but we also benchmark against, I'd say, global standards. So, we're in a LEED Platinum building right now. The Art Science Museum is LEED Gold. The hotel itself is Green Mark Platinum. We also are ISO 121, 10121 certified here. And so those are one level of benchmark, I would say, in terms of best practices and how you do things. We do look at numbers across the board, but every property will have different thresholds. I think that we have a lower threshold in terms of a return rate for some sustainability projects than we would for others, but there still has to be some business sense behind it. Otherwise, I think the question is, are you really doing the most effective thing that you could be doing? Because if we invest in something that has a better return rate, it will allow us to do more in the long run than something that has a very, very slow or long return rate. So we look at everything on a case-by-case basis. If it's a particularly thorny issue, there may be more flexibility about it, but typically return rates would be similar to what Hilton is looking at.
So dare I ask you the same question, Jeannie? I mean, with a group as global and diverse as Hilton, how do you benchmark? How do you set targets across your group?
We do a lot of benchmarking internally. So our targets are actually globally, where we have the similar targets as Jude does in terms of water, waste consumption, carbon emission. So carbon emission is a reduction of 61%. We look at conserving water at 50% and waste at 50% as well. Similar ISO recognitions. We were actually just recognized by Global Sustainable Tourism Council, and so we do look across that pure benchmarking stage as well. I would say that Singapore here is a very small market, so there's informal benchmarking among our peer hotels, and so we do share a lot of initiatives as well as suppliers and thinking about partners as well.
I would say we also look at learning from people outside our industry. So we work, say, with partners like Changi Airport to try and learn what they're doing, and other enterprises as well. Like you, we do have global targets, and even as we add supply, we look at how we can absorb that additional supply and still hit our benchmark. So for instance, we added the Parisian in Macau, but we have now absorbed all of that energy utilization into the other assets. So we've compensated for the addition of that property to the portfolio.
So Jude, I'm curious. To be honest with you, I'm unsurprised that Sands, that Hilton are doing so much in the innovation and sustainability space. I am a little bit surprised to hear the same from a destination-specific hotel group in Sri Lanka like Jetwing, and you've really done a lot. How is it that, and you've been with the company for a long time, how is it that you've been so empowered to implement an innovation and a sustainability agenda in a group like Jetwing?
Well, being in the company for a long time gives you the leverage also. But when you prove yourself, and then being an engineer by profession from the start has been an advantage. Actually, if I am to say, innovative solutions are not that cheap, and you tend to run a risk. If I am to take an example, renewable energy is site-specific. In a very dense populated area or a commercial area, your renewable energy, potential of putting renewable energy is very limited. So actually in our area, in our country, the Asian, air conditioning amounts to about 50 to 60% of the total electrical consumption. So I believe a lot in measure to manage philosophy, because actually it tells you a lot when you measure things. It tells you a lot. We have to drill down. So one thing that we realize is 50 to 60% of your electricity is on air conditioning. So we looked at the ways and means how we can be sustainable on that. And then we went in for a solution, and then we were the first to bring in lithium bromide chiller, a vapor absorbent chiller to Sri Lanka, powered by steam, and steam was from biomass. So that was a bit of an innovative challenge, but of course, I should say, as quite rightly you say, the payback period. You know, the investments are so high. So the first, we, as wherever as possible, after that, we started putting up lithium bromide chillers, and we managed to pull down our carbon footprint. Now, where innovation and technology is concerned, yes, you tend to become a bit of a guinea pig. And as I told you before also, if you are unable to prove the 3 Ps, right, it might cost of risking your job also, right? So you have to prove, and especially on the 3 Ps, with air conditioning, bringing in a solution for that, we managed to bring down energy cost by 20%. So that was a very high target that was achieved. So, and then we are using cinnamon wood as a sustainable crop in, Sri Lanka is famous for cinnamon, and we produce about 58 metric tons, and out of that, 26 metric tons Jetwing alone consumes. So that way, we have been successful enough. And if I am to talk about the cost, if you compared to a conventional chiller, it's 2 times. The price is 2 or 2.5 times. So when it comes to that sort of capex, capital expenditure, the management definitely will ask, what is your repayment. And if you look at solar, thank God that the efficiencies have been improving, and your payback period, if it is a straight line method, it used to take about 8 or 9 years, where the management was refusing, or you have to thrive your way through. But thank God the prices are also coming down, and the payback period is about 5 to 6 years. And the lifespan of the panel is about 20 years. After derating, after 10 years, you derate it by 10 to 15%. So when you're sourcing that sort of equipment, you have to make sure that it's not only the price that matters, it's the quality of the equipment that is being used, and that different environmental conditions. So likewise, you have to take a bold step up. And there are things, innovative solutions that are available in the market. I think you were talking about benchmarking. Yes, benchmarking, you have to do benchmarking, but for example, I can't compare your this thing versus my one, because it all differs, right? So from property to property, if you take a square meter, energy per square meter, it will differ from here to my country. So it all depends on the architecture and the whole design of the building.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because hospitality is a global industry, and within hospitality we have global companies, but so many of the innovation challenges are quite local. For example, you do biomass using cinnamon wood. That's not a solution that you would implement in many places, right? I guess coming back to Jeannie, what are some of the unique challenges, I guess, here in the Asia Pacific in implementing innovation and sustainability versus the rest of the world?
I don't know that that would be unique to Asia, but I think one of the challenges we have is really the human factor. So we look at a lot of our employee bases as really the front lines of how we can impact sustainability. So we have 60,000 team members across Asia Pacific, and their awareness and understanding of sustainability is very different from region to region. So that is something that we try to impact. We have sustainability courses online. We have them engage a lot with our corporate headquarters as well as our local employees. And so for them, it's the awareness building, the mindset, and then also getting them to understand why behavior changes are set out to happen. And I think the other really important area is thinking around how regulation is different from country to country. So a little bit more of an external factor, but in EMEA and Americas, you have a lot of regulation coming in around plastic consumption. We're starting to see that trend in Asia Pacific, but not quite as heavily. And so we do have to lean into really our goals of creating that for our hotels.
So there's a public policy dimension to all this as well.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Jude, in Sri Lanka, is there a policy mandate to implement sustainability measures to the degree that you have, or is it simply just good business?
No, there's no legislation as such at the moment, but it's company-driven and the way the company perceives.
So I guess this is a question for all of you, and maybe we can have a bit of a discussion around this. But what's next? I mean, in a way, a lot of the solutions for hospitality have been floating around for a long time. It's sort of implementing them in new national contexts is certainly an ongoing challenge. But energy efficiency, renewables, we're really at the point of incremental and not revolutionary change now. So what's on the horizon? What do you see as the next frontier in innovation and in hospitality, I think broadly, and sustainability specifically?
I guess a number of things. One thing that we're experimenting with, which I think has great possibilities across all hospitality, is clear film solar panels, so that the ability to apply these films to all sorts of different surfaces in order to harvest more energy, so you don't have the conventional panels. I think that holds great promise. I think artificial intelligence and smarter building systems and smarter buildings, period. So the ability to measure what you're doing, it allows you to manage it more effectively, and just to get smarter about occupant loads and other things. And I think that will be an area that we'll continue to see great progress in as we go forward. And I think there's just so much more knowledge about sustainability now. So I think anyone building a property, you're going to have a huge impact on the viability and the long-term success of that asset if you start from ground zero and design in sustainability, because it's doing good, but it's also doing well as a result of it. So you're going to have a more efficient asset than you would if you didn't do that. So I think it's easier to persuade an owner to do those things. You have great case studies about why you're doing it, and I think that just starts to be the benchmark as people go forward. And I guess what will be interesting is the analysis on existing structures as to whether it would be smarter to, do very significant upgrades or kind of start over with some of them, given where they're located, raising temperatures, rising costs for all of your different utilities, and the continued focus on it.
Yeah, I definitely agree, especially about the building systems. And we have a proprietary system that we've been using for 10 years that also now talks a lot about risk indexes and forecast and trending those in different regions. I think going back a little bit to the first question you started off, which is with guests. So one of the big technologies that we're trying to implement now is also helping guests understand how much consumption that they're using on an individual basis. So building that awareness. We have things like Digital Key that is already utilizing technology in our guest rooms, and so that will eventually be enabling our guests to also understand what is their own carbon footprint.
How about in Sri Lanka? What's next?
I think, because the BMSs that we had about, say, 5 to 10 years back, the data that was captured is almost becoming obsolete. And labor costs going up, and management wanting to reduce the employees, because payroll in a company like us, a group like us, amounts to about 15% of the turnover. So that's reasonably high. So along with that, automation is really necessary. And sometimes you can avoid human error, because what we have noted is when humans are taking these readings, due to the constant monotonous of their job, you tend to make mistakes. And the moment you make mistakes, it's not been identified. But whereas when you automate a system, or when you have a smart system, you can give a threshold level so that it'll kick up and give a warning. So that happens automatically, so that a human being is being alerted, thereby some action is being taken. That's the way forward. I think things have to develop very rapidly and be tested.
One last thought. I think the great challenge that we all face, anyone with substantial food and beverage, is also smarter packaging. And I don't have the solution for that. Single-use plastics are just so ingrained into what we do today. And we've worked on straws and we've taken water bottles out. But when you look at how food is delivered and moved through its whole supply chain, that's a challenge that I think that there's an opportunity for all of us and for all of our partners in terms of the supply chains in order to improve as we go forward. So maybe there's a challenge as we go forward.
Yeah, so there are certainly some uncracked nuts in hospitality. I need to put in a plug here. So ADB, the Pacific Asia Travel Association, Plug and Play, and two of our friends on stage, Hilton and Jetwing, have partnered together on a program called Travel Lab Asia. And this program is sourcing clean tech solutions for hospitality groups in emerging markets, and I'm sure that's the reason why SANS isn't involved. Unfortunately, you're in Macau and Singapore and the U.S. But I guess the question I have for Jeannie and for Jude is why? Why did you decide to participate in Travel Lab Asia?
I think it's an incredible opportunity to source for partners. We are through and through a hotel management company, and we don't try to come up with our own solutions in that area. What our core business is managing hotels. And I think that secondarily is we have found that there are a lot of companies in EMEA who have really strong systems and modeling, but they don't have the infrastructure to support us in Asia Pacific. So I think there is an opportunity for a lot of, particularly in Southeast Asia, smaller companies or solution providers who can be that provider for us. We do want to grow at scales. We do want to be able to partner with one or two providers across the entire Asia Pacific region, but we don't have those identified. And I think what PATA, ADB, and Plug and Play are really pushing is this envelope for us, and that's a big part of why we joined.
Glad we can play that role. Jude?
Yeah, I think earlier I said we have managed to pull down our carbon footprint by 70%. Now there's another 30% remaining. So that is the most hardest part. So that we can't do alone. So that's a bit of a hard journey that we have to go in. So why we really got involved is we are looking for solutions for that. And then the way the world is moving, we have to be with others, and innovation is a key area that plays a major role. So from what I have seen in the morning, okay, it was slightly not focused on hospitality, but I think surely there are areas that I could pick up on, which I'll be going back and contacting them. So innovation is needed, so that's why we plugged in with Plug and Play.
A lot of exciting potential. Does anybody else have any closing thoughts? Okay. Jeannie, Ian, Jude, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much to our panelists, as well as Jason for moderating the panel.